Today I will be interviewing an amazing guest. How are you doing, Kevin?
Very well, Johnny. How are you?
Good, thank you. Can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yep, be happy to do that. So I'm Kevin Bryant. I am first and foremost a student, a longtime student of Tai Chi Chuan, Yeung Family Tai Chi Chuan, based in the UK. I have a couple of schools, one in Surrey, the county of Surrey, and another school that's based in Brighton, Hove. And I'm a longtime student of Jim Uglow, who has a school in Walthamstow in London, who's been teaching for a long time. And that's my quick introduction.
I'm very young, young Tai Chi, and how can we use it in our lives, and what is the history of Yeung Tai Chi?
Okay. So let me try to do this without taking too much time, because there's a lot of history. I don't pretend to be a martial arts scholar, so I don't want to get myself in trouble by trying to go through too much detail. But basically, Yeung or Yang style refers to a family's name. So most often the family and the style is referred to as Yang style, Y-A-N-G. But actually, more precisely translated, I guess you could say, or spelled in English, it would be Yeung, Y-E-U-N-G, the family's name. The family goes back 5 generations in terms of the founder of the art, but Tai Chi Chuan actually goes back much further as an art, as a martial art. It goes back to the 12th, I think about the 12th century. And the Yeung style was really created or started by a gentleman named Yeung, or Yang Lu Chan is often the way it's spelled or way it's pronounced, Y-E-N-G-L-U-C-H-A-N. But in Cantonese, also known as Yeung Lu Sim. So Y-E-U-N-G-L-U and then S-I-M. Again, I'll try not to get too bogged down in the differences in spelling and Cantonese versus Mandarin, etc. But basically, so we'll say Yang Lu Chan started the art back in, or started to learn the art, you could say, back in the early 19th century. He trained with the first, often called the first family of Tai Chi. So the first family was the Chen family. And there's a sort of a colorful story as to how he got to train with that family. But he started to learn under their tutelage. And he was already an accomplished boxer, kung fu artist, before he started training with them for many years. And but then he adapted the Chen style to create his own style of Tai Chi Chuan, which he later took, and it really became I don't want to say it's the best style of Tai Chi by any stretch. Obviously, the Chen style, as the founding family, had a very serious and proper martial art. But the Yang style probably became the style of the art that was most commonly taught and practiced around the world. Well, first in China and then around the world. So there were, as I say, so 5 generations. So started with Yang Lu Chan, and then passed down to Yeung Kin Hu, which was then passed down to the name. I mean, obviously, also very accomplished and powerful martial artist, but was then passed down to a very sort of famous figure, both in terms of his name and in terms of his presence. A very large man whose name was Yang Cheng Fu, or Yeung Lu Sim. Sorry, not Yeung. Yeung Yang Tai Chi, and he was really the one who made Tai Chi popular around China. He was the one who said that he wanted to help the sort of common man in China, and women in China who were not at the time viewed as being as healthy as they might be around the country. He thought that this would be a great system for health. And so it spread its way around the country, and then as over time became this big art around the world. But then he passed it on to his successors, to his family, and the one in terms of our strain of Tai Chi, the one who was most important in our line, was Yeung Yang Tai Chi, who was also not as famous perhaps as his father in terms of the popular or common Tai Chi practitioner, but he was also extremely accomplished martial artist and fighter, and he was ultimately based in Hong Kong, where he moved in 1949, and he had three daughters, and we now are getting, in terms of the sort of fifth generation, we have gotten we have learned our system from Mary Yeung or Yeung Mali, who has been my teacher's teacher since 1997, and that's a quick history to bring us to today, and that's the style that I've been practicing for the last 23 years or so.
Right.
I think you had another question there somewhere, but remind me what your other question was.
Okay, but thank you so much for the history. I enjoyed that. Actually, I became interested in Tai Chi, right? Because of this movie. I don't know if you remember this movie. Have you seen it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, the Tai Chi master, yes.
Well, I also became interested in too because of Jet Li.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, right. So basically, when you were talking about the Yang Tai Chi, is it true that you said it was a colorful background how he got into it? Is it like where they only teach their family only, right? Is that true? They,
Say,
the,
say that again.
the Yang family will only teach close family, right? Is that true, or is that's just the movie?
Yeah. So well, as I said, the grandfather, Yang Cheng Fu, taught many people, hundreds and hundreds of people. But the distinction is, what style of the art was it? Was it the pure essence sort of the art, or was it kind of a watered down version? So there was this concept of inside door students. Perhaps you've heard that term, right? Where they're the people who trained literally inside doors with the master, and those people were lucky enough to learn really kind of the pure strain of the art, versus those who, sort of the common people on the street who got a different version. So there are many, we always talk about Tai Chi as being kind of an onion, that there are many layers to this onion, which is so true. And you can still teach or train in Tai Chi, properly train in Tai Chi, but just be kind of, maybe on the surface of the onion, or maybe a couple layers down in the onion, but the core, the real essence of the art, maybe you never quite get to touch unless you're fortunate enough to be not necessarily inside door student, but to have the kind of relationship and the kind of trust from the teacher to learn a bit more. So, long answer to your question. They did teach many people outside of the family, but it tended to be more of this watered down version of the art, good for your health, but not something necessarily that you're going to take out on the street to defend yourself in the way that they had learned to do that.
Right. Thank you so much for that. For me, I'm very interested. How did you begin learning Tai Chi, and what made you love Tai Chi?
So, I was listening to one of your other interviews the other day. I think I had a similar story to tell. Um, the you know, I'm was born in 1960, so I grew up during the time when Bruce Lee was a thing, right? And David Carradine was a thing. There's the show you probably have seen, heard about, Kung Fu. So I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and these guys were kind of in their prime in terms of the movies. And there was this show called Green Hornet. Perhaps you've heard of that show that Bruce Lee was starred in, and it was always kind of frustrating because you'd watch this show and you'd want to see, kind of just wanted to see Bruce Lee do his thing, but it was always like it was about 30 seconds. There would be this fight with Bruce Lee with his skills on display, and even though it was a brief moment, you just said, "Wow, that guy's got something unbelievable, and whatever it is he's got, I want that." So I think a lot of us who grew up during that time were, literally seduced by what we saw in the movies and what we saw on TV, and it was like, wow, I want to do that. I want to be like that guy. And so that's what really kind of was the beginning of a love affair with the martial arts. And although I have to say that because of my upbringing, so my parents were my mother in particular, was pretty protective. Didn't want her son to be, doing karate or any of these sorts of things because, he's going to get hurt or might get hurt. So I wasn't able to take proper classes when I was a teenager. I kind of created my own version of karate. I'd buy every book that you could find, and there was a great book. There's a great book called "What is Karate?" Perhaps you've heard of it. Masoyama. I think it's had a couple of different titles depending on the edition, but what is Karate? I think, and it was really actually a pretty famous book. And there was this guy who practiced Okinawan karate, Masoyama, and he was also a big guy. And there's some classic pictures in the book of one picture of one of his students breaking a beer bottle with it's like a frozen picture. He's chopping the top of the bottle off, and you can see it breaking. And of course, the rest of the bottle is just still. And there's another picture in there of a famous battle he had with a bull. So he gets into the ring. I mean, not like I don't think with a proper audience around, but he gets into a ring with a bull. And he does sort of hand-to-hand combat with this bull, and he literally chops off the horn of this bull, right, with his hands. And there's a picture inset in the bigger picture of this horn that's chopped off, just sitting in the middle of the ring. And then, okay, so there's all that, right? That's cool. That's kind of the bling of the art, you might say, right? That was pretty sexy to a young kid. But then there was one of the very first pictures in the book was a picture of Masoyama standing up with his hands outstretched like this, and he's just standing upright, and he's looking very. I didn't have a word for it at the time, but he's looking very meditative. And he talks about in the book, he talks about Zen and the importance of Zen and Zen meditation, but never really elaborates, never really talks about, why or how or what he was doing in the picture. But something just captured my imagination, and just that one picture of all the pictures in the book that said there's this other side of martial arts, of karate, that was really interesting. And so that kind of probably also said something about my own interest. So even as a 12-year-old, I was really interested in Eastern philosophy. I would, sort of began, and I was raised as a Methodist, Christian faith deal, and pretty kind of standard stuff. But then I started to kind of question the whole basis of kind of Christianity and so on and so forth. And I started to explore some of the major religions, so Buddhism, Hinduism, and so on. And Buddhism happened to be the thing that really attracted me the most, for various reasons we could talk about, but just say that Buddhism seemed quite like it suited my character, my personality, and what just fit. And so I, at one part of my life, kind of considered myself a Buddhist, or specifically a Zen Buddhist. And so that, together with this, going back to the martial arts, and that part that was not moving, that wasn't all whiz bang, there was, for me, that there was something that just really spoke to me. So fast forward a couple of years, I stumbled on a book. In fact, I remember the color of the book. That's about it. Can't remember the author, but it was a red book on Tai Chi Chuan. And it was like an old book, like maybe from, I don't know, 1950 something. Someday I'll find it. I'm convinced I'm going to stumble on it, and I'm going to, back home again. But I opened the book, and so Tai Chi, if you know a little bit about Tai Chi, which it sounds like you do, most of the pictures were of people and just taking these postures, with these funny names, White Crane and flaps its wings and etc. Single whip and so on and so forth. But just these still pictures, and sort of like the book, what is karate? Very, very similar kind of. It spoke to me. There's something I said, aside from the words, reading the words in the book, which are always a bit, I don't want to say it's a waste, but when you read these Tai Chi books and they take you through the form, they say, sit on your left or stand on your left leg, pick up your right, all this sort of stuff. You can't really get anything from it. So, but the pictures to me just spoke volumes that there was something else at the core of this art that I needed to find out about at some stage. So that was where, that's a little bit about my, early years. And then at some point I had a proper job. I was a banker for a bunch of years, for 20 years. So when I was in banking early on, I said, okay, now I need something to balance all this stress and focus on results and stuff, corporate world. And so I had somehow, I can't remember exactly how, but thought I would try Aikido, because Aikido seemed, I guess, a bit like, had all these elements. It was about harmony. It was about the inside as much as it was about the outside. I'd seen someone doing it at one stage, a couple of people, and it just looked really cool, interesting. So I took up Aikido with a very famous Japanese teacher in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who had studied with the founder of Aikido. And again, it was just kind of total luck that I found this guy, but and it was an incredible experience, introduction to very serious teacher, very serious practice, and it was my first taste of this thing they call ki, right, or chi in Chinese, or this energy, something that I hadn't quite felt before, but that felt it was quite good. It was a nice feeling, and I just was totally consumed by Aikido for a couple of years. So trained a lot and sort of grew and all that sort of thing. But there was something about it that wasn't right. There was something about the effect that it had on my internal working. So my spirit, my mind, it was something very one-sided about it. I found it was more difficult to relate in a way to people, frankly, in a way that was positive, especially from when you're trying to do a job, kind of a high stress job, and there's got to be a lot of conversation. There's got to be, you've got to market people. You've got to do all that kind of stuff. I found it taking me too much, for some reason, taking me too much into myself, and perhaps in some ways too passive, interestingly enough, too passive. So I stopped after a couple of years. I mean, I could have ridden that for a long time in terms of while I was training. It was a great feeling while I was training, but it just didn't marry with my lifestyle, with my professionally, didn't work well. So I stopped. So then I did some other things, still always pretty, liked movement, liked exercise. I was a soccer or a football player, depending on what country you come from, at a fairly competitive level, high school, university, and so on. So I, at least needed to do something, run, jogging and that kind of stuff. And then at some stage, I think after I stopped with the Aikido, I started doing weight training. So I weight training for several years, and like anything that I tend to pick up or get that I've got interest in, I tend to become a little bit obsessive about. Some might say obsessive about these things. So weight training became my thing, and I probably spent 6 or 7 years of fairly serious weight training. I wasn't trying to get to some competition or any sort of level, but I liked the return in terms of my health and my feeling of confidence and all these sorts of things. Stress management, it worked quite well for a number of years. And then I got sick. So this would have taken me to, so we're coming closer to Tai Chi now. This would be like 1995, maybe a little bit sooner. I got sick as you often do around Christmas time, right? You've been running hard all year round, and then you've got time to relax during the Christmas break. So the Christmas break comes, and I'm just, so I got the flu or something, right? So for 3 weeks or so, I was just really sicker than I'd been in a long time. Too sick to go to the gym. And so the ironic thing was that though I was sick, didn't want to get out of bed a lot of the time, my body was starting to feel better. And I said, what's that about? Why am I feeling better? And then I realized these aches and pains that I'd kind of come to take for granted were starting to go away. So like maybe the back, there was that little thing in the lower back that wasn't so bad anymore. Maybe the like doing those bench presses, you maybe strain the ligaments here in the chest and the pectorals, and you realize, well, that's starting to feel better. And so in a lot of ways, I started to feel a lot better. And so when the sickness was finally gone, the flu was finally gone, I said, well, maybe it's time to find something else. Maybe that's not the right thing. So that's when I, for some reason, remembered, I guess I'd been reading, because all along I've been reading a lot of things about philosophy and Buddhism, Taoism, and these different things. So I kept coming back to Tai Chi, would keep appearing, keep showing up, Tai Chi. So I was in Boston at the time, and I took a trip into Boston, into Chinatown, and met it was a herbalist down there. And I just asked, I said, hey, do you know anybody who teaches Tai Chi? And so the guy kind of points virtually upstairs. I mean, it was just around the corner and upstairs. And so I go into this place, and that's where I met Chujin Soon, who was the second disciple of Mary Yang's father. So there's Mary Yang, and you probably won't remember the succession of people I tried to get through here in terms of the history, but her father was the fourth generation practitioner from the founder of Yang style Tai Chi, Yang family Tai Chi. And so he had 3 disciples. And so Chu Jin Sun was his second disciple, who came to the States many years before that. Kind of the mission was, okay, spread the good word to the U.S. on our family's art. At the same time, there was a guy in the U.K., Chu King Hung, who was the third disciple, who was kind of looking after the UK and Europe. Anyway, so I went up and started to learn the form from Chu Jin Sun, and the funny thing was, I had no idea that this guy was supposed to be the big deal guy. I just and it wasn't like very ostentatious. It was a little not that small, but it wasn't a huge training hall, and there weren't that many people. There were maybe 4 or 5 people. Some of them just drinking tea or coffee, shooting the breeze, and then there were 1 or 2 people moving around. And I thought, wow, this is pretty chilled, And so then Chu Jin Sun takes me aside and starts, showing me basically 1 move was it, the opening, what some people call commencement. He never used those terms. In fact, he never really, to me, spoke, hardly any English. It was basically point, and he might say, okay, you do, or something like this, but he didn't appear to speak English. Of course, found out later that he did actually speak English, but he was very clever in that regard. So he would teach me 1 move at a time, come in and do it, and then come back the next week, teach me another move, wouldn't say anything, leave me alone to train. And in many ways, it was kind of, I guess, a very traditional teaching style, and that a lot of it was about, well, how badly do you want to get this? Are you going to keep coming back, even though I'm not giving you any extras, no dessert, I'm not giving you any sweets, you just come and do this. And if you keep coming back, then maybe we'll take you someplace else. So I learned the form after a good 12 months of that, going every week and pretty much learning. I mean, as we got going, he would teach more than 1 move at a time, but basically that was the method. And then his approach was, you get 3 corrections, you learn the form once, you go back to the beginning and start over, first move, second move, third move, and then he would show you, correct the hand a little bit, and you would have to learn for yourself why that was better than it being somewhere else, right? You would, doing the form that way, you'd kind of realize, oh yeah, that does feel better or easy or something different. So 3 times. And that basically took me through the couple of years that I was with him into 98. And that's when I came over here, and I was introduced through someone else who was at his school in Boston, was introduced to Jim Uglow, my current and longtime teacher, who was in the family system basically, and who was a close colleague to others in the family system, well known and regarded. And so that's when I started with him, and that's that brings us more current to today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the history on. I actually enjoy it. I enjoy it. Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
I noticed when you talk, right? You are more into the soft style. I noticed, right? Like you're not. I noticed that because Tai Chi is a soft style.
Yes.
But I keep hearing people saying it's a brutal style. Is it? I keep saying it's a brutal style because basically, I watch. I have a DVD, right? Because you always mention books. I have a DVD of Tai Chi, and I also watch one of your video. I think it's really creative. I think it's the most amazing. I never thought of that before. That was your. It's your video of Star Wars when you were doing the.
Oh.
I love that one. I love that one, and also that's very cool. That's very cool. But you're welcome. But in the there's the DVD. I have it somewhere, and it's on Troy Foot, right? And I forgot the master name, but he's really famous. He's out there, but he would do the Tai Chi stuff, but also he would teach you the how to use the move, and to push. Does
Yeah.
it? Do they actually teach you in there, or like, or only the form,
Yes.
or is it only for health?
So my teacher is so Jim Ugolo is a fighter. Period. Martial artist first and foremost. So his school is, in fact, has a reputation for producing really good martial artists, for being really sort of practically grounded in Tai Chi as a martial art. Okay, and there's many wonderful stories and so on that I probably shouldn't go into some of these stories, but anyway, it's absolutely and something that he drills into us from day one to today, and certainly Mary Yeung, who I get to see normally just about every year for the last many years. She makes a point quite pointedly that this is an internal martial art. Those three words. This is an internal martial art. And when she says that, sometimes her eyes are blazing. She's in your face, saying, "This is a martial art." Don't forget, So yeah, I won't pretend to say that I'm the kind of I'm the man as far as it as a martial art, but I've certainly had enough experience with it and have worked with enough people who are very skilled, like my teacher and others, some of my colleagues, to see the power in it, and to have had a couple of real life situations that shows that this is yes. And so, and in some people, when you said brutal, I think, and I believe strongly that we're not meant to become fighting machines. I mean, that's not the point, really. But we are certainly meant to be able to protect ourselves and to protect people who mean a lot to us, right? If that ever happens.
Right. I used to have. Well, I still do. I'm a pacifist. I used to when I was a younger kid. The reason why I was in martial arts or I loved martial arts is because one is Power Rangers, second was Jackie Chan. But I always have the philosophy or the moral that, like you just said, right? Protect your family, protect yourself, not to, beat on others, right? And then when you were talking about how, was it the way karate or something? The book that you were reading? What was it? The way karate? What was it?
Oh, yeah, the way of karate, yes.
Yeah, you were talking about the guy, break the bottle glass. I was thinking about Mr. Miyagi, as he did the thing. But yeah, you're right. It's not about fighting, but it's about improving. Well, I was thinking about improving yourself. But,
Yeah, in fact, I mean, it's perfect. That's a great point, and a great segue maybe to sort of, when they talk about Tai Chi Chuan, and people, what does it mean, Tai Chi Chuan? What does it translate into? And so it's usually translated as supreme ultimate fist. So Tai Chi, supreme ultimate, and then Chuan, fist. And so, it means it's the best, it's the biggest, it's the most powerful martial art. And well, maybe it is, but that's not really the point of that's not really the meaning underlying it. And so Mary would say to us that really it means to enlarge your circle, means to get better. That's it. So, but of course, when it says that that's it, and like a lot of things Chinese, that there's always many other kind of interpretations and layers to what the circle is and what to enlarge is. What does it mean? What are we talking about? Enlarge what? What is the circle? So yeah, there's a little bit more to the story, but still it's about improving. It's really about improving. And I think one of your questions was about what does the success mean? And for me, that's largely what it means. I'm on this journey through this art of making myself bigger in some way, not better than other people, but just what I have to work with, making that bigger, expressing myself in its truest sense, and creating. I love this. This song. So I was, as I say, raised in the Christian sort of tradition. Although I wouldn't say I'm a hard, a huge daily practitioner of Christianity. But there's a song that's, I think, a great song, which is "This Little Light of Mine." You've probably heard of this song. "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Have you not heard of the song? "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Let it shine.
Hold on, I don't know. I have to check. I'll check.
Anyway, whatever that light is that's inside all of us, you want that light to shine, to get bigger to the point where you can share it with other people, that light. And you can, interpret that light in many different ways. But for me, that's what success is growing that light. That light gets bigger and bigger, and then sharing it with people in a way that helps them on their journeys. So that's.
You're sharing with us what is the history behind it, and how you became learned about Tai Chi. I was thinking about how can we actually harness, because I know I have one of this question you were talking about, and I was curious about what is you already say it, what is qigong and how can we use it now. We know that everything is energy, right? So we are as energy too.
Yeah.
So I remember back then I was reading a book on qigong, and I remember it was teaching about how to harness the energy. At that time, it said that you were supposed to like say these sounds, and then when you say these sounds, what happened is that if you like, let's say, I don't know, in your practice of Tai Chi, there where they do like the ball, right? And then basically it's about energy, right? So basically, I remember I was like saying the sounds, and I can feel the electric running through my hand, and I can feel it. But that was when I was little, though. I haven't done it for a long time. And also another one is I noticed that is the Tai Chi when you do the form, is it based on the yin and the yang? Because I noticed that where there one of this movie I watched where you stand and but you move in a way that is like the yin and yang. Is that true?
But you asked many questions there,
Yeah,
Grassa.
I'm sorry. I got excited. Okay, I got excited. Okay, let's start with the. I'm sorry, I got excited because I love also Tai Chi. It's just that it's really
So yeah, I'd be somewhat facetious. I think I get most of what you tell me if I miss something here. But as far as the so the chi, and I touched on that earlier. There is something, I don't. Yeah, there are some of these Facebook pages and Facebook groups where there's this like they want to the whole conversation of chi, the whole issue around chi is I think the word people use is it's woo woo. It's not real. It's fantasy. And come on, guys, let's stop thinking about the chi that's crazy. There's no scientific basis for that. It's all about Tai Chi or any of these martial arts. It's about body mechanics. It's about speed and all that sort of stuff. Well, I can only say talk about my experience, and of course, with great respect, people who have taught me and who I've watched and have touched hands with. And there is something. That's all I can say. There is something that is can't really totally describe it. In fact, you could describe it different ways depending on how it manifests itself. But when I'm teaching, I often say, in terms of that, and usually, frankly, when I teach, I think trying to follow the tradition of my teachers, don't talk too much about it, because it can become a distraction, because people are so focused on feeling and sensation. And then, as one student I think about occasionally, who will say, wow, this feeling in my hand, it's like, wow, it's like, wow. And meanwhile, while you're focused on that, thinking about, say, as a martial art, someone punches you in the face, or something, or more practically in your daily life, if you're too focused on the sensation, then you can't be an effective human being in your job or with your family or in a relationship if you're too focused on it. So it can be distraction, I think, for sure. So the focus in the early days is just on how to relax the body, soften the body, open the joints, and that sort of thing. At some stage, if that goes well, something else, people start to feel something. So I often use as an analogy, I talk about a garden hose, or hose pipe, as they say in the UK. And so I say, for most of us, that garden hose has got a knot in it, right? It's okay, you turn the water on, but it's like nothing's coming out of the end because it's got a knot or a kink in it. So the first job in learning Tai Chi and in teaching Tai Chi is to relax and take the kinks out, get the knots out. When the knots and the kinks are gone, then the water can flow. Okay, the water can flow. So forgetting about Chi for a second, just in terms of blood and lymph and all these other fluids in the body, it doesn't take a big leap to understand that, yeah, that probably is good for you, and that probably will make you both healthier and stronger, right? But at some stage of the training, hopefully, not that everyone's going to have this experience, but if you follow the instructions closely enough, and if you practice and train, as you've done, even though maybe you weren't training, every day in Tai Chi or in Qigong, but at some stage, maybe you feel something else, which is that vital force. So, let's call it that vital force, something that's, whether it's, sometimes they talk about it, I think Westerners try to use electricity. Perhaps it's electricity, perhaps it's electromagnetic force. Maybe there's something.
It felt like that. It felt like that. It felt like that. Yeah. So yeah.
So there's a book. Oh, I can't remember the name of the book. Actually, a guy I met in Greece when I worked in Greece many years ago, who wrote a book called. Well, if I remember, I'll send it to you separately. But because you probably enjoy reading this book. So there's this guy who lives in this Chinese master who lives in Indonesia. And this Greek guy, Kostadanos is his name. Kosta and then Danos, I think, is the guy who wrote the books. And the Magus of Java, that's it. The Magus of Java, Magus Java. And he talks about finding this guy, this master, after he'd seen like a YouTube video about this guy. And you can find, his name is Lee, Master Lee, I think. And if you look up and search on YouTube, Indonesia, and then this guy's name, I don't know what else you put around it. But anyway, he does some things, and you can argue, is it fake? Is it? But it's kind of hard. It's pretty compelling viewing. Anyway, why did I start down that path? So So he and the guy who wrote the book is an engineer, actually, which is what kind of adds a little bit more credibility to what he writes. And he tries to describe what is this energy, what is this chi. And so he talks in terms of electromagnetic energy, and he uses, he even talks about photons, that it's that level, it's electromagnetic, it's on that end of the scale, it's light energy. And anyway, it's fascinating. I don't know whether it's true, I don't know whether, but it's an interesting take on what it is inside the body. So anyway, so you have this feeling that's maybe different than anything. So when I use this analog of a garden hose. So the first job is to, get rid of the knots. Then the water can flow out of the end. The chi can flow, and then we want to make the pipe even bigger. So can I take the garden hose and make it accommodate more? So like the body. So for most of us, the body's very, it's densely packed, right? There's muscle that's like tight, and it's, we're all stiff, right, to different degrees. So if I can open up and relax, then this energy can run more freely in the body. And then at some stage through the right practice, actually the pipe can get bigger and can accommodate more. So at the right moment, so at the same time, I can turn the faucet up over on this side at the source, and I can drive more water or more energy through the pipe, right? And then of course, you could say, I don't know, it's the final stage, but you could say the next stage is, okay, now I want to aim the hose somewhere. So I want to be able to aim the hose to, I don't know, knock that guy over or whatever it is, but I want to be able to direct the energy in the direction that's going to be most useful. So maybe not a perfect analogy, but it works well for me. And I think there's a lot of people who I teach when it's time to start talking about chi, that there is this process in our training that allows for us to both feel it, to allow it to run more freely, and then to be able to control it for health or for the martial arts, for defense.
Now, when you're talking about when you're working with them, are you talking about push hands, right?
So when I say touch hands, so yeah, I mean we do a fair amount with pushing hands, but there's set pieces as well, right? So there's partner work that we do where there's a form that you learn, right, and then you do it together. It's cooperative, but at the same time you test each other through this form where there's one side A and side B. So there are many of these different types of forms that people can learn. We have a couple that we focus on. And then there's the push hands, which can be more freestyle, can be actually also kind of a set piece. So can be ones you've probably seen on YouTube, or keep doing it over and over again. We have different names for the ones versus maybe what it might say on YouTube. And then there's a whole host of these types of set forms, or I should say exercises, and then it can become more free, right? You can start one way. In fact, there's one that I have up on Facebook. I don't know if you've come across it, but where I'm with one of my senior students, and we start in kind of a set piece. We keep changing it up, and then we start moving. So practicing footwork, and then toward the end, it becomes more freestyle. Okay, so you can go that full range, and then you can take it to the final stage, depending on your partner, depending on the insurance level at your school, where it can become more sparring, more real, sort of more proper fighting. But you've got to be careful. I don't encourage that for most people, because accidents happen. People do get hurt, and it's kind of silly, frankly. So I think for that reason. But if you have a good teacher, they can take you to that point of danger where you're never going to actually get killed. You're never going to actually lose your arm. but you can learn something about how one needs to react, how they need to be prepared for a real situation. So that was part of that question. I know what there was another part of your question.
Right. There was another part, because I keep seeing it a lot.
Oh, yin yang.
Yeah, it's either in the movie and it's in the when people do Tai Chi, when they do the form, it's actually a yin and yang circle because I've seen it, like where they would do like they have a circle. There was one movie where this guy was doing Tai Chi and he was in a circle, right? And then when he do the Tai Chi, it's like a circle too. Is it true?
There is, without giving up too much of the goods here, there are, yeah, I mean, it is a circular style, I would say. I think that's one simple way, that what seems to be a straight line often is not really a straight line. Even in karate, even in the harder styles, maybe that looks like a straight punch or something, but actually, if you really dissect the movement, actually, there's a lot of circles in there. So there are ways to employ and deploy that concept in a way that's not just because it sounds, not just because, the thing about Tai Chi, which is both a blessing and a curse, it's a marvelous kind of system, there's a logic to it, which is beautiful. Yin yang, positive, negative, opposing forces, taking your opponent into nothingness, blending with them, turning it back on them. These kinds of thoughts, which are really they're beautiful philosophical kind of concepts, but actually in the end, it's also meant to be exceptionally practical. Tai Chi is ultimately, if it's done properly, is very, very practical, both for your life and for, God forbid, a martial situation. And it's meant to be done, versus like I watch, I like to watch UFC stuff from time to time, boxing match from time to time, just to kind of watch the skill or not, just the kind of the contest is interesting to watch. But and I'm not saying Tai Chi is any different than a lot of perhaps styles of Kung Fu. It's meant to be, it's about life and death ultimately. As my teacher said to me years ago, he said, look, depending on your character, you can approach the art from two completely different they seem to be two completely different perspectives. One side is as a monk, you can approach it as a monk, or you can approach it as a warrior. But actually, they're both the same in some way. They're both the monk is about life and death, right? They're focused on life and death, right? They're focused on the monk is, what is this life really? And what is going to happen, or what is death? What, just philosophically, so their focus is singularly on these ideas. What's the essence? What lies between the two? What's the essence of life? What's the essence of death? Right? So it's that kind of a devotion and focus. A warrior is also focused on life and death, but in the sense of, okay, I don't want to die. I'm going to survive. But in that the nexus of those two things, there is a chance for, I guess you could say, for enlightenment. There's a sense of, I know what it's really about. I know what it's really about. I have been at that place. I've seen truth. So there's this great connection between the two concepts. So, but you choose, it's not like you have to be this type or that type, but you choose what fits your character best, and then approach the art from that perspective.
Right. Thank you so much. I had this one point where people always, because I know that I think I messaged you once. people think that meditation, because I know that Tai Chi is a form of meditation, right? But people think meditation that, you sit. But there is, people can do all those types. For Tai Chi is actually a form of meditation, right?
It can be. I mean, certainly the output, if you will, that we're focused on measuring output. But if you want to think of it in terms of output, the output can be very similar. So I practice both. Well, I practice a number of things. So I mean, Tai Chi is a very big. You talked about Qigong, so it's a very big. It's encyclopedic in terms of all the things that are a part of Tai Chi Chuan as an art. So there are sitting practices, there are lying down practices, there are ways to walk, stand, that go beyond just doing the form. What everyone thinks about Tai Chi is just the form. Well, it covers all these things, even eating and so on and so forth. Anyway, so meditation. So seated meditation, let's say, sitting practices and standing practices. So Qigong, you could say, is also a form of meditation. But they have different outputs. They have different outputs. So doing the form, in many ways, I talk about stillness and movement and stillness. And one of the reasons why it's such a great art, great practice from a mindfulness perspective, is the problem when you're teaching someone to meditate, or someone who's trying to meditate, right? The old monkey mind problem, right? So I sit down, I close my eyes for 30 seconds, and it's all over the place. I'm thinking about the grocery list, what I got to do at work, So trying to control that, contain the monkey mind seems impossible. And the harder you try to control it, the more it seems to want to fight you, right? So in Tai Chi, one of the great things about Tai Chi is it gives you something to do. It gives your brain, especially your left brain, which is the problem, something to do. So there are all these instructions, right? So you don't just lift the arm up and down. It's, okay, I start from the feet, I loosen, I push, blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. So there are thousands of instructions just to getting the arm up here properly, right? Not to say they're useless instructions. They're all very important pieces to the movement. But as you're working the puzzle, the mind is focused on the puzzle. And like anything else, like when you do a math problem or a word problem, whatever it is, when you're like you do all this great work with, interviews, and you prepare, and you probably go into these states when you're totally that's all you're focused on. And there's a certain amount of, you don't realize you've forgotten yourself, And at the end, I don't know, there's a certain calm, there's a certain peacefulness that comes from having that singular focus. So Tai Chi is really great in that respect in terms of the form part, the moving part, because there's so much to do. Just in standing, just in moving the arm, just in turning and doing this move. There's so much to coordinate inside that leads to the correct movement, the correct feeling. And so yeah, that's a lot of the power but still the difference of doing the form versus sitting. Because when you do sitting, as I say, it's a whole different construct. So not to say that you don't have thoughts in your mind, because then there's all sorts of different styles of meditation, right? Different things you can think about. But when you end, it's a little different feeling than when you've been doing the form or when you do Qigong. That's a really, it requires really more both conversation and experience to make that probably more crystal clear to people as to why they would be different. But it's similar but very different at the same time. So here's one thought I should have said earlier on in our conversation. So why is Tai Chi Chuan different than yoga, right? So yoga, there's a lot of these great Indian traditions, and yoga is are at the core of a lot of Chinese systems, right? A lot of this, I mean, from the early days, right, came migrated up from India. Especially a lot of these internal things, internal ideas. The art really, let's see. It became very difficult to sort of, why am I having so much trouble with this idea? Maybe, I'll tell you what, so maybe I come back to this. Why don't you ask the next?
It's okay. Well, actually, yeah, we were talking about, actually, you're getting to my question I was going to ask you, because the whole idea, what's the difference between, like you said about yoga, but what's the difference between Tai Chi Chuan, or they call it Tai Chi, but I don't know, I might mess it up, but the difference between Bakwa Chuan, that's what I want to know.
The difference between?
The difference between Tai Chi and Bakwa Chuan, or Bakwa.
Oh. So Bagua. So okay. So where I was coming to very haltingly before is that the difference between the two. So yoga and Tai Chi Chuan, is that, not to say that some of the yogas don't have a similar idea at their core, but Tai Chi Chuan ultimately is, as I say, it's an internal martial art, right? So yeah, okay. So martial art meaning, yes, it's practical in the sense of fighting or defending yourself, no doubt. But perhaps even more importantly is when you're doing the form, you have this martial idea underlying all of the movements. So going back to what I was saying earlier about a scholar being a warrior or a monk, those two approaches. If you have this concept of sort of life and death, if you can do the form with that kind of purity of intent, that when you do ward off, for example, you're trying to express a martial idea, not just put your hands up. So when I'm teaching, people learn the form, and a lot of times it's more like dancing. They do the dancing. And sometimes people call it kind of airy-fairy, it's just, oh, that's nice, isn't that nice, way he's moving, but it doesn't have that spirit in it, doesn't have that idea that this is not just put my hands up, this is to be used for blocking or striking. So if you have this character in mind, if you have this intent in mind, then it changes what's inside the form, and then of course what's expressed outside looks different as well. So this is going back to my my rambling earlier. This is one of the big differences between a sitting practice and standing practice. Sitting meditation, you do meditation, you don't have usually a martial concept in mind. Your main job is, maybe it's sitting and forgetting, maybe it's awareness, maybe it's focusing on the breath, these sorts of things, maybe it's energy movement, but you don't have this idea of, right? And that does something internally. This is not just put my hands up, this is for my life. This is for my life, right? So big difference. So anyway, and so that's a little bit, hopefully, to kind of maybe clarify, and how the experience of Tai Chi Chuan as a health system or spiritual practice, whatever, is different than at least most of the yogas that people might practice on that side. Now, in terms of Bagua, I'm not a Bagua practitioner. I only know a bit of what I read. My teacher knows a bit and has taught it, years ago, a little bit. But I think, is my understanding, this is my humble understanding, is they come from a similar root. That's you've got these three. There are many internal systems, but kind of maybe the three most famous systems are Tai Chi Chuan, Xing Yi. Yeah, you've heard of Xing Yi.
Yeah, I heard it. I heard it. Yeah.
And Bagua and Bagua or Pagua. As far as I know, is a proper is fantastic, and it seems as if perhaps it's more a question of, is this speak to you? Is that the language that speaks to you more, or is it Tai Chi Chuan that speaks to you more, or is it Xing Yi? I'm not here to say one's better than the other. They are. Having watched it, I have seen people do Bagua. It does look different in many ways, but I can also see a lot of core elements that are similar. Very similar.
I do too. They use different concepts. I'm not sure on that, but I do see what they kind of like use the circle. They use the circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the similar, but I'm not an expert, so you are, so I'm not. So I guess that's my thing. But thank you so much for that. I appreciate you taking the time for me to interview. But before we let you go,
Yeah.
is your passion what you love to do? Because I know we've been talking about Tai Chi, so what do you love to do? But oh yeah, before I ask that, you don't have a British accent because whoa, you speak like perfect English. Hold on.
Perfect English. I love that. All my British friends will love that you said that. I speak with perfect English, so I can say to them, "You guys don't speak with perfect English." Well, I'm American by birth and lived in the States for many years and came over here as an expat in '98. So although I've been here for 20 years, old habits die hard. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes when I'm in the company of others who are native to this country, a little bit might kind of sort of come out, a little different way of saying things. But yeah, that's it. They laugh at me. They keep trying to teach me. My students all. I have one student who keeps saying, oh, what is it? They're words like knickers and underpants and trousers. I say pants sometimes. I used to say pants all the time, but pants mean knickers over here or underwear. And so I would get, severely beaten, by saying, no, it's not. Anyway, yeah, so that's my story. That's why my
Okay,
wrong.
thank you.
Yeah.
What is your passion and what do you love to do besides Tai Chi, or is Tai Chi?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Tai Chi's pretty much central for me. But I like to write as well a bit, and sometimes think I've tried a couple of times of writing the great novel or whatever, and that hasn't quite come to fruition. But who knows? One day maybe. But really, it's in terms of pastimes, Tai Chi. So it's not just the couple hours in the training hall. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of life. So it's runs through everything that I do, and quite happily. So.
Right. Thank you so much. As I noticed, I hear about it. It's like for you, Tai Chi is a lifestyle, right? And that, like, I was thinking about how it's the same thing as what they say, business, personal development. As you know, that you said, you see that I do self improvement stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's basically I noticed that everyone I interview, it's about not just like a one thing time thing, right? But it's about who they are as a person. It's who they're being, it's their identity, right? And they live their whole life that way, and they express it. Because a lot of times people don't express who they are. They're afraid, right? But it's okay to express. That's why I began as I studied deep into the not deep enough, but as I learned, Bruce Lee expressed himself, right? through his art, like you express yourself through your art, right? And I think that when you're talking about you're a writer, I encourage you to write a novel because my dream, you made my dream come true, right? You let me interview you, and even though you could have said no, right? And I enjoy talking to you. You know that, and I get to see you smile, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Oh, that's very kind. You're very nice to say, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't as painful as I thought it might be.
Yeah, I know people would like think it's painful, but no, because basically I try to put in respect. You know, I wanted to be for as Asian, right? I'm Asian, and they have peers where they said you have to respect your elders. So I put that in my mind. But there are people they're rude. I try not to be rude to them, but sometimes they're rude, right? But it's okay. But I think you did cover the principle and philosophy of Tai Chi, right? Before I let you go.
Yeah, I guess so, sort of. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's in there. It's in there. I probably wasn't wrapped up real neat, but I guess obviously the Tai Chi symbol says a lot, right? And opposites, opposing forces. So I think actually what's interesting, maybe to put this out there for you. A lot of people talk about Tai Chi and the Tai Chi symbol, and they think it's about harmony. It's not necessarily about harmony, right? It's really about understanding the opposing forces, understanding yin and yang, and using those as one needs to, using and understanding them, right? So from a martial arts perspective, power comes from there being voltage, being a positive and a negative. There's got to be one pole. There's got to be a positive pole and a negative pole. The more I like to think in terms of electricity, the bigger those differences are, the more voltage, the more potential for power. And so using those, so if you create more positive, you must also be creating more negative. The more, and vice versa, the more negative, the more positive. And then when you need to open the current, open the switch, you choose to open the switch, and then you get light, or you get movement, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. So it's about understanding the interplay of these forces. In fact, you know what? I'll read this very quickly if you don't mind. This is from a book. Is that okay if I read this to you?
Okay.
So this is from a book that you won't find in too many places. It's called Practical Use of Tai Chi Chuan. Its applications and variations. It was written by Yeung Chung. So our Sifu's father, who was the fourth generation, right, of the family. And so it's a very thin book, but it's like a Bible for us. I refer to it regularly. There's a lot in, between the lines, and the words can be read different ways. The longer you train, the more understanding. But anyway, just this one opening paragraph. The value of Tai Chi Chuan in self-defense is universally acknowledged. Applying it properly, you can neutralize the opponent's force with a much smaller one, command the situation leisurely, and even utilize his force to your own advantage. It is based on the Chinese philosophy of yin, female characteristics, and yang, masculine traits, which control all the changes of phenomenon in the universe, period. Yin also means softness and inactivity, whereas yang means strength and activity, but both are not mutually exclusive. Strength can be hidden in softness, and activity is camouflaged in inactivity. Constant practice of Tai Chi Chuan will enable you to acquire peace of mind, relaxation of body, not flabby but flexible muscles, and an excellent physique regardless of your health at the start. So I think that's put very well, succinctly, about the art, what it's about, and of course volumes are written about each sentence, right? But I think that's a good one maybe to leave you with. And And then what was the, so then what was the other question related to that? Or was there was
Well, there was something else. How can we practice Tai Chi effectively? Oh,
oh,
no, oh no, wait, okay. I don't know if we cover how can we use Tai Chi in a fight. I guess Tai Chi is like a better form of fighting.
oh, well, okay. So that actually that brings me. So the second thought, and actually maybe it's a good thought to leave you on, so that we don't go too long here. But so because it also speaks to the philosophy a bit and to kind of the core. I think for me, the core essence of the art in many ways. So there's a great expression that I will paraphrase this way. My opponent moves, but I arrive first. My opponent moves, but I arrive first. So at some level of skill, and like if you've ever been, so some of my seniors who I will spar with or push hands with or whatever, right? People who are really skilled. When you get in their space, you have this feeling of like you're very small all of a sudden. Like it's like you're claustrophobic because you can't see. You look at them. It's a strange thing. It's almost metaphysical to me, for me anyway. Is you have this sense that they have this complete sense of you. Maybe they know you better than you know yourself. That's the feeling. It's kind of spooky feeling. And so, and you almost know before you've done anything, they're going to be able to respond before your fist leaves the holster, or before you try whatever it is, right? So at its highest level, Tai Chi is, it's like pure awareness, right? It's like, it's beyond technique. I mean, of course, there are all these techniques. There's thousands of techniques. But people are like my teacher, who's, fabulous practitioner as well as a fabulous teacher. Whenever he's showing me something or we get into that space, I just instinctively know that he would always be ahead of me. Always be ahead of me. It wouldn't take some complicated skill or, technique. He would always be there first. I would start something, he would be still, but then his fist would arrive first. And so in that regard, so once you get to a certain level where that awareness, where your circle is so large, then as I say, it's beyond skill. And sometimes it has nothing to do in terms of as a martial art about actually having the confrontation. It's about knowing when I teach my guys, talk about self-defense, it's like recognizing situations long before they actually become a situation, right? Before they become, don't go down that street. Why are you sitting over there in the bar next to that guy who's, is gonna, has had too much to drink and is already, why don't you sit over here? Or why don't you leave? Or why don't you run? There's no reason mostly. Okay, occasionally you might get into a situation. Occasionally there's something, you just got to do whatever it is. But it's not meant to be, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the UFC and all that stuff, it's not meant to be this long dance of, okay, I do that, you do this, I do that, you do this. If you're at this level, as far as your opponent goes, there's no need. It's done. It's over. It's a short contest, whether because you left or because you ended it.
No, thank you so much for that. Where can we find you?
So the Surrey Tai Chi Club, Surrey Tai Chi Club. We have a couple of classes in a town called Hersham and a town called Esher in the county of Surrey. And then in Brighton Hove, I have a couple of classes down here at Brighton Tai Chi Club, Brighton, Brighton Tai Chi Club. So if you were to search either of those two, I should come up pretty quickly, and so not hard to find. So.
Well, actually, I also found you on Twitter because because I used
Right.
and then tweeted. I was like, oh, Okay, and then I was thinking about interview, and that's how you're doing it. But thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your breakfast.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. It's been interesting.
Yeah.
Fun.